Welcome to Camp Constitution Radio with your host, Hal Shurtleff. This show is heard on WBCQ The Planet every Monday night at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time, broadcast out of the beautiful Monticello, Maine, in Aroostook County, and also it rebroadcast on impnation.com every Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's hosted, or I should say sponsored, by Camp Constitution, that, among other things, runs a week-long family camp in beautiful Rindge, New Hampshire, in Cheshire County. This year's camp will be from July 10th to the 17th. And for more information, just visit our website, campconstitution.net. I'm very honored to have a special guest, Marita Noon. And Marita, are you there?
I'm here. I'm here for you.
Okay, well, I'm going to read your introduction right from your website. Energy Makes America Great. Marita Noon is the Executive Director for Energy Makes America Great, Inc., and the companion educational organization, the Citizens Alliance for Responsible Energy, CARE. Together they work to educate the public and influence policymakers regarding energy, its role in freedom, and the American way of life, combining energy, news, politics, and the environment through public events, speaking engagements, and media. The organization's combined efforts have made Marita America's voice for energy. Marita is also a columnist for Breitbart.com and a regular contributor to many other online commentary sites, including The American Spectator, RedState.com, Canada Free Press, and NetRight Daily. Additionally, her writings can be found in numerous newspapers and websites. Her 20th book, my goodness, that's quite 20 books. Maybe one or two, but 20. Anyway, her 20th book, Energy Freedom, is her first in the current affairs genre. As a conservative commentator and energy expert, she is known as Marita Noon. Readers of Marita's previous books include bestsellers Wired, That Way, and Communication Plus. Known her as Marita, how do you pronounce that? Littauer?
Littauer.
Okay.
Yep.
Prior to her work in energy, Marita was known as a motivational speaker and author. She has trained thousands of men and women in spoken and written communications. Well, welcome to our show.
Well, thank you. It's a treat to be with you. I appreciate it.
And what prompted me, I met you on two occasions at the climate change conference in Manhattan, New York City. I think it was in 07 and 08. There were 2 years in a row. I was there as a media rep for the magazine that I was affiliated with, The New American. And I got to meet you, and I believe I interviewed you and heard you speak. And then I'm listening to a radio show, which I very seldom do here in Boston. And I said, I know that lady. I said, I should get her on the show. So tell us a little bit about Energy Makes America Great, and then I have some questions for you.
Sure. Well, Energy Makes America Great and the companion nonprofit organization, the Citizens Alliance for Responsible Energy, have a goal of educating the public on the role that energy plays in our life. The Citizens Alliance for Responsible Energy was founded in 2005, before I was a part of the organization, and it was founded by some oil and gas guys in southeastern New Mexico who realized that the energy industry overall has done a really bad job of getting their message out there to the media and the public. And so these guys decided to kind of put their money where their mouth is and to do something proactive to get their message out to the media and the public. I assumed the leadership of the organization in 2007. In 2010, I was kind of alerted by one of my advisors. He said, Marita, you're getting a little bit too political. The original organization, the Citizens Alliance for Responsible Energy, is a 501c3, which means the IRS allows us to do public education, but not so much advocacy. And so the new organization, Energy Makes America Great, which is more what I kind of function under today, is a 501c4, which allows us to do advocacy. So I like to separate the two with this catchphrase, wake up, show up, stand up, and speak up. So CARE the Citizens Alliance for Responsible Energy, is kind of the wake-up phase, the public education component. And then the Energy Makes America Great is more the advocacy, the show up, stand up, and speak up, the get involved part of the topic.
One of the things that far too many Americans believe that fossil fuel is some type of evil thing that, left unchecked, will completely lead to global warming that we're already experiencing anyway, and all these terrible consequences. And the people in the fossil fuel business are just a bunch of greedy capitalists that have absolutely no interest in the environment whatsoever. That seems to be something you see in Hollywood movies almost consistently. And, of course, the Obama administration is totally into this thing called green energy, or alternative energy, or going green. And it's interesting, you mentioned electric cars on the Dan Ray show at WBC in Boston there when I heard you last week. And could you elaborate on how maybe electric cars aren't so green after all?
Yes, it's interesting. I wrote a column, and let me mention, I do write a weekly column on energy issues, and I believe you said that in the introduction. And last week, my column was specifically on electric cars. And President Obama, during his 2008 presidential campaign, made a pledge that by the end of 2015, we would have 1 million electric cars on the road. And now that 2015 is in the record books, we can now look back and see, okay, how did we do on this goal? And we're nowhere near reaching that goal. But the interesting thing is that as communities and countries have pushed electric cars, what has actually happened is they have increased the demand for coal-fueled electricity. It's interesting that most people don't really give a lot of thought to where electricity comes from. In fact, in my book, Energy Freedom, I quote the governor of Wyoming, Matt Mead, and I heard him speak when he had been elected but had not yet been sworn in. And he was telling a campaign story, and he said as he was campaigning, knocking on doors, as we're certainly seeing our candidates doing in New Hampshire right now, as he was campaigning in Wyoming, he knocked on a door, and he opened the door, and that person said to him, "We have got to get off of dirty coal." And candidate Mead said to him, "Well, what do you suppose we should replace it with?" And the man said, "Why, electricity, of course." And I love that story because I believe it illustrates how little most people really understand about how that electricity comes out our wall when we plug in our iPad or when we plug in our various appliances, and we have heat and we have air conditioning. And that generally in America still, despite President Obama's war on coal, more than 40% of our electricity in this country still comes from coal. So when you're driving an electric car feeling pious about what you're doing to save the environment, in fact, new research shows that if emissions are what you care about, that you're actually better off driving a gasoline-fueled vehicle than you are an electric vehicle.
Interesting. I was at the Henry Ford Museum a few years ago in Dearborn, Michigan, and they actually had a hybrid car from 1910. And instead of having the battery being the backup, it was the primary, and the gasoline was the backup. And they decided that the battery, just didn't work out. It was too cumbersome. 100 years later, they still have this gigantic battery that needs rare earth minerals to make it happen, which are only available in a few parts of the world. And I think there's some strip mining to get that. So it's not very environmentally sound to get this thing to begin with.
Exactly. Yes.
And then it's highly subsidized. So the free market, it's like I see these battery, these car charging stations in certain parking lots, especially in towns and cities that have something to do with the green communities or ICLEI, ICLEI, or what have you. And it's interesting that someone's paying for this. Now, a few of these things you got to pay for the charge.
Wait. Someone is paying for this.
Right.
Now, you may be heading there. I may be interrupting you, but who is paying for this is you and me, all those of us who are not driving electric cars. It's our tax dollars that are going to subsidize these things. And the same thing is true with solar panels and wind turbines, but particularly with solar panels.
Well, with the solar panels, solar energy has been around a long time. As the late Dr. Peter Beckman would talk about solar energy, he said it's solar dryer, a piece of string between two trees. Been around a long time. And I have no problem, I'm sure you don't either, with people who want to buy solar panels. I wish I could get off the grid. Most people who do these things they're on the grid. They're not off the grid. And they put these panels up, but it's so highly subsidized, you either get it put on so-called free, or they just simply raise your property tax, and then you get these things called carbon credits. And these solar panels aren't that easy to make either, and they cause a lot of environmental disruption to make these things. So talk a little bit about the solar panels, if you could, and why they're not so efficient after all.
Well, just like you said, I mean, they do work. Yes, we do know we have the technology, and we know how to take the sun, the light from the sun, and we know how to convert it to electricity. And people think, oh, well, the solar power is free. Well, yes, the sun itself is free, but converting it to electricity is most certainly not free. And in fact, it's a far more expensive form of electricity than would be coal or natural gas. And people feel like they say, oh, well, we've reached cost parity with coal. Well, no, they've only reached cost parity when you calculate in all the subsidies. I was doing some work around this time last year in Louisiana, and at the time in Louisiana, they had the most generous solar subsidies in the country. And you would get a federal tax credit for putting solar panels on your roof, and in Louisiana, you would then get a very generous state subsidy as well. And I was doing a radio show in Louisiana when I was there, like I'm doing with you, and a caller called in, and he called to kind of argue with me, when in fact, he made my point. Now, I don't recall the exact numbers, but I believe I'm at least close enough to get the concept right. He said, I got a solar system on my house. The cost of the solar system would have been $40,000. Now, first off, I love that right there, because that shows that solar systems are expensive, even though people sometimes think, oh, no, they're free. No, they're expensive. He said, I got the federal tax credit. He said, Bobby Jindal sent me a check, and he said, I ended up financing the rest of it. And in 5 years, I was able to amortize my entire solar system, and now I have free electricity. And after I got this call, I said, you know, you've made my point perfectly for me. Excuse me a moment. Sorry about that. I'm getting over a nasty cough.
Me too.
Anyway, I said, you've made my point perfectly, is that first off, the system's expensive to begin with. Secondly, we, taxpayers in the United States of America, we're covering your federal subsidy. Your fellow taxpayers in the state of Louisiana are covering your state subsidy. And then now you're getting your so-called electricity, or you're getting your electricity so-called for free, because what's happened is there's a system that's called net metering. And net metering means if you generate more electricity from your rooftop than you use in a day, then the utility company has to buy that electricity back from you at full retail. Now, this is important for people to understand. Anyone listening who has ever owned a business or does still own a business, as I have and do, you understand that you cannot buy your product at retail and sell it at retail and stay in business for long. But yet that's what net metering requires the utility companies to do. They are required to buy electricity from people who have rooftop solar panels. They buy it at retail. They sell it to their neighbors at retail. Okay, but wait a minute. There's extra costs in there. The utility company has a lot of additional costs. And when people, as you mentioned, Hal, are connected to the grid, it's like they're using the utility company as their battery backup. They generate solar power during the day, but at night when the sun is not out, they need to take electricity from the utility company. And if their electricity usage and excess balances out, then in theory, they pay the utility company zero. But yet, the utility company must maintain those lines, must have the customer service people there, must have the coal-fired power plant that provides electricity for that consumer during the night. And so what we're seeing now is a real shift nationwide in these policies, because what's happened is what they call cost shifting. And those who can least afford it are having their electricity rates go up to cover those people who are getting so-called free electricity. And in general, because the solar panels are expensive, as my Louisiana caller illustrated, only the well-off need that tax credit. So the well-off are making out with these solar panels on their roof, where those less well-to-do who can't afford solar panels on their roof are ending up having their utility rates increase because of those solar panels.
It sounds like my friend up in New Hampshire uses the term cracker welfare. You know, wealthy people getting being subsidized. I was going to also talking about wind turbines too. Now, this radio show is broadcast out of Monticello, Maine. Just about 10 miles north is Mars Hill, Maine, where there's some giant wind turbines just uglifying the landscape. A beautiful area. It used to be a beautiful area. And Mars Hill is a pretty economically depressed area. So whatever the folks there were promised, I don't know, all kinds of wonderful things. It hasn't seemed to make much impact in the community. I know most of these turbines are sort of out of harm's way, so there's not that strobe effect and some of the things when they're really close by. But so the same thing with wind turbine. And by the way, windmills have been around for a long time. I was out in Nantucket, on Nantucket Island, and there's a windmill that's over 200 plus years old, working just fine, thank you. And there's a couple of small wind turbines, a few hundred yards away that are broken. Some of these modern ones. I said, I think these folks had it right. And these windmills were designed to be. It doesn't matter which way the wind's blowing, any time of day they operate. But they make these predictions, like you said, 1 million electric cars by 2015, 20% reduction of carbon by 2025. Certain cities, cool mayors, all these programs. I think the city of Boston is hooked up to. They can't even keep the broken glass off the sidewalks, but they're going to reduce their so-called carbon footprint by 50% by 2030, which is just totally ridiculous. So can you address the wind turbine issue as well?
Well, sure. The reason I started with a solar panel specifically is solar panels are something that the average person, or at least in theory, the average person can have on their roof. You can be what they call distributed generation. And in all seriousness, if I had money, which I don't, but if I had money and I had to invest it in renewable energy, I would put it in rooftop solar, because rooftop solar at least makes some sense. I have solar panels on my roof, and I have friends in New Mexico who live off the grid. Now, it's not that they're super environmentalists and choose to live off the grid. It's that they are in the ranching business, and they live in very remote locations. And so they have solar panels on the roof. They have a system of essentially car batteries in their garage, and those car batteries hold the power during the night and so forth. So solar panels, I think, without a government subsidy, have a real place in the free market. Now, wind turbines are another story, because wind turbines are not something that the average homeowner is going to stick in their yard. And as you mentioned, they have some real negative consequences if they are nearby residential areas. They have some real health impacts, And of course, I'm not even mentioning the killing of birds and bats that happens as a result of the wind turbines. And wind turbines are, very intermittent. And in the cold snap that there was in the Northeast a week or so ago,
and right now,
those wind turbines freeze up. And, of course, the solar panels get snow on top of them. And at the time when you really need that electricity the most, those renewables are not producing. And, in fact, the American Wind Energy Association, which is the lobbying organization for the wind energy industry, has been all over Capitol Hill in the last year because their subsidy, which is called the production tax credit, expired at the end of 2014 and had expired. And throughout 2015, they kept trying to get Congress to reinstate retroactively that tax credit. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe that it's something like the installation of wind turbines dropped by 90% when that tax credit went away.
Really?
And that tells you, and I may be slightly off, but if I don't have my number 100% correct, I'm very, very close. And so that tells us that this is a market that is driven strictly by tax credits. It's not driven by market demand, but it's driven strictly by the tax credits. Now, unfortunately, in the omnibus spending package that was passed by Congress at the end of 2015, the same omnibus spending package under which the oil export ban was lifted, part of the trade-out that was done in Congress was the production tax credit was extended for wind and for solar.
So we gained a little bit by allowing the ability to export oil, but on the other hand, we lost with they're still subsidizing the. By the way, there's a great documentary you may be familiar with. I recommend it to the listeners called Windfall. I believe it's on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen it.
I have not.
Yeah, I recommend it. It's about I actually been through this town. It's a small town in New York State where they had come in. It was a European company that came in and find out who was on who was about to lose their home and what have you. And they went in there and started getting rights to put this and that. It really caused a lot of problems, and the problems with the wind turbines, the headaches that people were getting, the strobe effect. Just all kinds of problems with the energy there. What's interesting, too, about coal, I tell this to people a lot. They look at me, people who aren't familiar with this, I said, coal is a green energy. They said, what are you talking about? I said, you get a picture of New Hampshire, like, say, Mount Monadnock, which is not too far from where we have our camp. If you get a picture that's 100 years old, what are you going to see in that picture? You're going to see pretty much very little forest, because people use wood for most of their heating and a lot of their fuel and what have you to make a lot of things. But thanks to technology, it was possible to transport, get the stuff out of the ground for the most part, and ship it anywhere in the country relatively cheap. So coal was sort of a green energy, and natural gas, which was it was something that was a nuisance. They were burning off as quickly as they could. Then the seamless pipes came around, and they could ship this thing pretty safely and inexpensively. And now we have, of course, plenty of oil all over here in the Northeast that they have to let us tap into it, enough to last. I've heard some for 500 years or 1,000. I've heard some really crazy predictions. They said we have plenty of oil and plenty of gas to last.
Well, we do keep using our natural resources, coal, oil, and natural gas. We do keep using them more efficiently. We get more energy out of less resource. We get better MPG on our vehicles today. So when you look at that, that's what is called resource expansion. And while we perhaps have a finite resource, we're able to use it more efficiently. And so that resource lasts longer and longer and longer.
And that's
now,
just
plus,
good stewardship.
Along the lines of what you were just talking about, do you know who saved the whale?
Oh, well, I guess you could, well, they were using whale oil for lamps, right? So maybe it was Thomas Edison?
No, it would have
No?
been Rockefeller who discovered oil.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, he discovered the ability to ship it, too. He was quite, and refine it in an efficient
So,
manner.
yeah, we were about to go, off of Nantucket. You mentioned Nantucket. And the whaling industry was killing the whales using the oil. And whale oil, as you pointed out, was a primary commodity back in the day. And just about when the whales went extinct, oil was discovered.
It's amazing. I've actually been there, Drake's oil field there in Pennsylvania, Oil City, I think, Pennsylvania. It's quite an interesting place. They still have oil there, although they don't.
Yeah,
make
they
much
still
out of
do.
it now.
Amazing, isn't it? Though we were supposed to run out long ago.
Yeah, I'm hearing some of these wells that have supposed to have dried up have sort of replenished, and all of the oil they're finding in North Dakota, as well as the gas they're finding in just pretty much, and of course the propaganda about the gas and the fracking and how evil fracking is and so forth. And yes, maybe we got a few minutes left. Maybe if you are you familiar with the fracking issue?
Oh, of course, of course.
Okay,
and
I thought you would.
I want to bring up when part of the problem, what the antis address about fracking is not so much about fracking. If your listeners do a quick internet search and you search Environment America and fracking by the numbers. In October 2013, this environmental group called Environment America issued a report called Fracking by the Numbers, and it's supposed to, scare you off of fracking. But if you look at, I believe it's page 9 of their report on the left-hand side, in a box, it says, defining fracking. Mm-hmm. And it says, and I paraphrase because I don't have this in front of me, but I paraphrase, it says that the industry likes to use a more restrictive term that defines just the actual hydraulic fracturing process. But we like to use a more inclusive term. And in essence, if you were to read this little definition of fracking, you will find that they define fracking as anything really from the permitting process all the way to the production of an oil and gas well, when in fact hydraulic fracturing, also known as fracking, is about a 2 to 3 day process, a part of drilling a well, and specifically in what is called tight rock. And I like to explain it to people. Picture your kitchen sponge. Your kitchen sponge has all little pockets of air in it, and those little pockets of air are all connected. And when you put your sponge under water and then you squeeze it, water comes out. Well, in essence, that's kind of what fracking does, except for you've got rock deep underground, shale rock, which is a very hard rock, and you wouldn't see any little pockets in it unless you looked at it closely under a microscope. And those pockets have oil in them. But unlike your kitchen sponge, those little pockets of oil are not connected. And so what they need to do is they need to somehow crack that rock so that those pockets of oil can flow out. And that's what the hydraulic fracturing or fracking process is. But it's done miles underground, nowhere near the water table. And they use high pressure and fluid and little grains of sand so that once they crack that rock open, the little grains of sand kind of settle in those cracks and hold the cracks open to allow the oil to come out. Now, years ago,
Marita, we have 1 minute left, so we have to wrap it up. I guess just only half an hour. We could go on. How can people get a hold of you? EnergyMakesAmericaGreat.org is the best website to go to. Okay, thank you so much for being on, and thank you for listening. God bless.
Thank you.